Salutations. Today we're diving into a very controversial topic, the sexual double standard. Why is it when men have multiple sexual partners, they're praised? When women do the same, they're harshly judged. The men are dubbed as studs, women are dubbed as sluts. More importantly, is this sexual double standard justified or is it just sexism? The best way to find out is to dive into the literature review through peer reviewed articles to find out what the science actually says, not just what random people and opinions. So, to start off, does the sexual double standard, scientifically speaking, exist? And to answer this question, yes, it exists and it is a measurable phenomenon. In fact, a huge meta analysis over 99 studies, 120,000 participants found that people consistently judge casual sex less harshly when men do it compared to women. That is not just an opinion, that's aggregated data. To understand why it exists, we need to go back to the basics. Reproduction. Men and women evolved very differently, with very different biological risks when it comes to sex. Women can get pregnant, men can walk away. So, across evolution, women had to be selective because one bad choice could mean 9 months and a baby. Men, meanwhile, could afford to be more opportunistic. Right now, we're not going to be discussing the morality about this, it's about the biology. David Buss and David Smith laid this out clearly in their sexual strategies theory. The research across 37 cultures show men prefer more short-term partners on average, while women prioritize security and resources. That selective behavior gets baked into social expectations. So when a woman has casual sex, she's seen as acting against her nature. When a man does, he's seen as fulfilling his biological role. One very important theory and point is the sexual marketplace. The reality of the situation is it's much more easier for women to get sex than for men. A woman can walk into a bar, log into Tinder, and get multiple offers by the end of the day. A guy? Not even close. For example, on dating apps, research have shown women swipe right on a tiny fraction of profiles, while men swipe right way more, but they still get fewer matches. A study by Birch and Newman found that the average woman gets more attention than 95% of men. Why does it even matter? It matters because when something is harder to get, it's more valued. So when men have sex, it's seen as a success. When women do, it's seen as expected. This is how supply and demand works, and it explains interpretation. For men, sex is scarce. For women, it's accessible. The dynamic reinforces the double standard. But let's step outside the world of apps and look at real life situations. So, across studies, men consistently reported more desire for casual sex, but also experienced far more greater difficulty accessing it. For example, in the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent Health, research have shown that men had significantly fewer sexual opportunities than they desired, while women's opportunities were way much more aligned with their intentions. This points to an access asymmetry, not just a preference gap. Another research described the dynamic using the sexual economics theory, where sex is a resource disproportionately controlled by women, and men must invest effort, status, or commitment to gain access. So it applies to real life dating, not just apps. Anthropological evidence also supports this. In studies of small scale societies, like sorry, I might butcher its name, the Tisamni or Aki, perhaps, men often engage in resource provisioning or public displays to secure sexual access, while women are more selective. Again, this reflects greater effort and lower access for men. So, whether you're looking at US college campuses, adolescents, or any type of other cultures, men have to work harder to get sex, which helps explain sexual success and which is socially rewarded for more than for men than for women. And let us not forget the classic study by Clark and Hatfield, a foundational piece of research in evolutionary psychology and sexual behavior studies. So, in this research, long story short, when women asked men to have sex with them, 75% of men said yes. When the men asked women if they want to have sex, take a guess how many said yes? Zero. However, we could also critique that study by talking about how there are a lot of risks associated with women actually saying yes to random strangers. So, in a nutshell, so it could potentially be very heavily critiqued, but right now we're just talking about the results of the study. However, it's very important to look at the other side of the coin. So, some people might argue that the sexual double standard isn't fixed, and they're right. Feminist theory offers critiques of this whole system. From a feminist standpoint, the sexual double standard is a gender mechanism of social control, used to restrict female sexual agency while excusing or glorifying male behavior. Feminist scholars argue that slut shaming reinforces patriarchal control by punishing women who deviate from submissive or passive roles. In this view, the double standard isn't just natural, it's cultural enforcement of gender inequality. But even with this feminist theory, there's a debate. Some scholars, especially sex positive feminists, recognize that female sexual agency is rising in some cultures, especially where women gain financial independence, contraceptive access, and social mobility. For example, highly egalitarian nations such as Sweden, Norway, and all these Scandinavian countries, cross culture studies show that judgments of proximity are either equal or flipped, especially among younger cohorts. So while evolutionary theory highlights why the double standard emerged, feminist theory shows how societies choose to maintain or challenge it based on values and power structures. So ultimately, we boil down to the question: is the sexual double standard justified? Okay, so here's the bottom line. Yes, the sexual double standard exists, and it's not just the patriarchy. It's a result of biological asymmetry, social reinforcement, and market dynamics in dating. When casual sex is harder for one group, and in this case men, it gets more social credit. And when it's easier for women, it gets scrutinized, not because it's wrong, but because people see it as a choice, not a challenge. Now, is that fair? Absolutely not. If you're asking whether it's scientifically explainable, the answer is yes. The good news: culture attitudes are changing. In more gender equal societies and double standards weaken. It's not hardwired, it's just influenced by biology, history, and culture.